Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the Intro to Criminal Justice course, we are now in week 13. So for this week, I've got some interesting discussion board questions. I hope that you find the accompanying videos to be thought-provoking, and let's see how it goes.
Hello, my name is Officer Mitchell, and I run the minimum security G-Tank pod here at South Placer Jail. We have approximately 50 female minimum security inmates. We run a very strict program. It's strict with discipline. We like to enforce a lot of work ethic, education, and teaching the girls various tools and skills that will help them integrate back into society.
My name is Megan Brown. I received the Model Inmate Award for being here for almost a year without getting write-ups. I work 3 jobs and I just stay focused on getting out. I work from 4 to 10:30 in the kitchen. When I get to work, I heat the food up and feed the jail. Use senior meals for Meals on Wheels in Placer County. On Mondays and Wednesdays, I go to school from 5 to 8 p.m. Every 8 days I work, I get a day off my sentence also. It prepares me to have a job for when I get out. It's made me think a lot about my responsibilities more than I think I would if I was on the outs.
My name is Tracy McCario. I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I go to the kitchen. I work until about 11. Clean the showers. And then I help with like medical. I volunteer for a lot because I like my day to go by quick. After 5, I go help clean booking. And then after booking, it's a wrap. I'm in bed. It's helped me a lot. It's helped me to realize who I am, and it's a work in progress. There's things that I want to do long term that I hold myself back from doing because I guess change is hard. But Placer County's helped me in a lot of ways realize that there's a lot of things I could do to better myself, and there's resources. There's great resources out there for us if we just utilize them.
I'm Sarah Jones. They run a pretty tight program here. It prepares you for the outside world, to hold down a real job, to be a productive member of society, to know that you're capable to do that. Good preparation lays the groundwork for a job on the outside. I would like to go back into retail. That's my background. Even for people that haven't had a job before, that come into this facility, who start working, it's an opportunity for them to know that they're capable and they can go into food, or they can go into retail, or that they actually can do that, because these jobs are very similar to those of a restaurant or a retail store.
I hope that it changes someone's life for the better.
The other day, we told you about American prisoners in more than a dozen states protesting poor labor conditions, among other issues. And prison labor is a $1 billion a year business, and many inmates say it amounts to modern-day slavery. As the debate goes on, some businesses, big businesses, are making a profit on the circumstances. Here with more is Molly Barrows, legal journalist with the National Trial Lawyer magazine, who joins us from beautiful Pensacola, Florida. Molly, thank you for being with us. I mean, what sparked this whole thing?
Well, it was the riots, those deadly riots at Lee Correctional Institution in South Carolina earlier this year. 7 inmates were dead, dozens more, well, actually about 17 more were severely injured. And inmates now, through the Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, it's a group of inmates that are basically leading this strike, and an organized group, and they say enough's enough, that the conditions, the living conditions are poor in prisons across the country, that violence like what they saw in South Carolina is common at other prisons across the country. And they also want to bring attention to the fact that not only are living conditions in prisons terrible, sentencing structure is terrible, unfair sentencing, racial discrimination, and one of the big ones is they basically feel like modern day slaves, that they're being forced to work for pennies on the dollar, like some making less than $1 a day or right around $1 a day. And federal law says they have to work. Federal law says federal prisoners, in fact, have to work. So a lot of times they're doing menial or custodial type jobs, but a lot of times companies are hiring them as well and using some of this labor to profit. So these inmates are saying, hey, give us what's fair. If we're going to be serving our time, then don't treat us like modern day slaves.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have basic human rights, but the other hand is they are prisoners. But I am curious, and I'm dying to know this. When we first covered this story as a headline, which businesses are profiting from inmate labor, and how are they doing so, Molly?
Well, it's really interesting. I did a lot of online searching. I looked at a lot of other articles that have covered this particular issue. And Career Addict, which is a website that basically helps people with job searches, had an article that listed the 7 companies as of last year that were making the most or were also profiting off prison labor. And again, these are companies that are making, lots of money, and they're getting labor at a discount for a lot of smaller services. And some of the companies they listed, including McDonald's, which was making uniforms and things like straws. They talked about other companies, including American Airlines, hiring prisoners that would answer their call service center, their call center, Microsoft, Walmart. There are a whole list of companies, and some of them do business directly. I mean, you've heard in recent years companies like Victoria's Secret and Whole Foods received a little criticism in the press about doing business with prison labor in order to, cut down on their labor costs. But there's another way that they go about, that these businesses go about doing business with these prisoners as well, or with these prisons, I should say. The American Legislative Exchange Council. I had not heard of this group before, but I guess it is it's an organization that's made up of voluntarily of state legislators, and they influence everything from sentencing laws to that impact inmates, as well as they help with legislation that allows inmates to manufacture these products and these services. So they have a direct hand in passing legislation that makes it easier for these companies to use these prisoners for their labor. And going back to your point, I mean, they are prisoners. They are required to work. I don't think anybody would disapprove of them making the most of their time while they're there. But the other side of prison, which often gets neglected and ignored, is that it's supposed to be about rehabilitation. And a lot of these jobs that they're using these inmates for are not giving them skills that are going to prepare them for life on the outside. So ideally, most of these inmates are going to be back outside again, and they're already being nickeled and dimed and charged for everything inside those prison walls in order to get, food from the commissary, in order to email their relatives. All sorts of services that obviously we take for granted on the outside are available on the inside for a fee, and then they're getting paid pennies on the dollar by corporations or by the state that they're living in. And in essence, they come out either in debt or at zero or without a lot of money, and they can't rebuild their lives like that. So if we're going to put them to work, at least let's put them to work doing something that's going to be of value.
So intriguing and insightful. Molly Barrows, legal journalist for the National Trial Lawyers magazine. Thanks, Molly.
The death penalty is enforced in 32 states in America, and capital offenses include things such as treason, espionage, and death resulting from aircraft hijacking. However, committing murder is by far the most common reason that people find themselves on death row. Over the years, execution methods have included everything from hanging to firing squad and even a gas chamber. But today, all 32 states that have the death penalty use lethal injection, as it's considered the most humane way to end a person's life. Let's find out, in this episode of the Infographic Show, how does lethal injection work? There have been 1,472 executions in America since 1976. Of those executions, 3 were by firing squad, 3 by hanging, 11 by gas chamber, 158 by electrocution, and 1,297 by lethal injection. Lethal injection is the practice of injecting one or more drugs into a person to cause them to die immediately. It was first developed in the United States and is now a preferred method of execution in China, Thailand, Guatemala, Taiwan, the Maldives, and Vietnam. Once the person's heart stops, death is pronounced. In most cases, this takes around 7 minutes, although if there are complications, it can sometimes take longer. So what's actually injected into a person to bring on cardiac arrest? According to the Death Penalty Information Center in Washington, D.C., the process for lethal injection in most states involves injecting 3 separate shots, all of which are delivered via intravenous drips. The first injection is an anesthetic called sodium thiopental, a strong barbiturate used to send a person into a deep unconscious state so pain cannot be felt. The drug affects a number of neurotransmitters, causing brain activity to be depressed and blocking the actions of brain receptors, therefore causing a dormant, non-reactive state, typically within 30 seconds. This anesthetic is intended to last throughout the lethal injection process, so when the following injections are administered, the person is completely unaware. The tubes used to administer the drugs are flushed clean with saline, and then the second injection, this time of pancuronium bromide, is administered. This drug acts as a neuromuscular blocker, preventing communication between the nervous system and muscles. As the person has no muscular control, a state of paralysis is reached. The diaphragm, a muscle used to pull air into the lungs, stops working, causing breathing to cease. One last saline flush before the final injection is administered, this time potassium chloride. This disrupts the electrical signaling of the heart, stopping it from beating and ending the person's life. According to a 2002 study in the Journal of Forensic Science, the average time from the first injection to the heart stopping is 8.4 minutes. But what about rare cases when things go wrong and the process takes longer than anticipated? Though the general consensus is that lethal injection is the most painless and humane way to end a person's life, there have been some botched attempts. We researched some cases that have made the headlines over the years. In 1985, Charles Walker was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of armed robbery. He was a death row inmate at the Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois until September 12, 1990, when Walker requested a last meal of pan-fried wild rabbit with gravy made from the pan drippings, biscuits, and a dessert of blackberry pie with whipped cream. His execution was scheduled for after dinner, but the execution was prolonged because of human error and equipment failure. According to Gary Sutterfield, an engineer who assisted with Walker's execution, a kink in the plastic tubing going into his arm stopped the flow of chemicals into Walker's body. Additionally, the intravenous needle was pointing at Walker's fingers instead of his heart. Walker's execution took far longer than it should have, and he suffered excruciating pain throughout. Next, we have Joseph Cannon, who on April 23, 1998, prepared for his death in a Texas jail. Cannon was convicted of attempted rape and murder in 1977 when he was just 17. He spent more than half his life on death row before facing the needle. He made his final statement, and the execution process began, but a vein in Cannon's arm collapsed and the needle popped out. As the witnesses looked on, Cannon laid back and exclaimed, "It's come undone." The curtains were then drawn for 15 minutes so the officials dealing with Cannon's execution could fix the problem. When they eventually reopened the curtains, Cannon made a second final statement and the execution was completed. And finally, a case that hit the headlines this year, Doyle Lee Ham, who faced the death penalty at Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. Ham had been at 1987 after a jury found him guilty of shooting and killing a motel clerk during a robbery. But Ham had terminal cancer and a history of intravenous drug use, leaving his veins feeble and compromised. The attempted execution was halted after medical personnel were unable to find a vein, despite trying to insert needles in the groin, ankles, and lower legs for nearly 2 hours. Dr. Mark Heath, the doctor responsible for examining Ham, was quoted on NBC News as saying, "During this time, Mr. Ham began to hope that the doctor would succeed in obtaining IV access so that Mr. Ham could get it over with because he preferred to die rather than to continue to experience the ongoing severe pain." Ham survived to tell the tale, and it's not been confirmed whether or not he will need to face another round of injections to end his life. These are severe and unfortunate cases, and though of course they are in the minority, things do go wrong. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, a national nonprofit organization providing information and data on capital punishment, 7.12% of lethal injection executions between 1890 to 2010 were botched. Capital punishment has always been a controversial topic, and whichever execution method the state decides is most humane, it is likely there will always be the occasional problem. As we've learned today, the method of lethal injection puts a person to sleep before inducing a cardiac arrest, and most of the time, it's a straightforward procedure.